The Conservative caucus seems to be at odds with each other based on the position of Jenny Burns. Jenny Burns being the campaign manager for the Conservatives during the last election, and I'm pretty sure she has been for a while now. It sounds like some of the Conservative caucus wants to keep her around while the other half wants her gone.
What did the Conservatives that you spoke with tell you?
They basically blame Jenny Byrne for the defeat in the last election, failing to adapt to the situation with Justin Trudeau leaving, Donald Trump arriving on the scene, and failing to grasp the change in the mood of the electorate when they did not change their platform, when they did not change their message. And also her critics say that Jenny Byrne brings the worst out of Pierre Poilievre, out of his character, out of his negativity. For her, everything is a battle, I've been told. If you don't win, you lose. And it brings out the negative tone of Pierre Poilievre that seems to be rubbing electors the wrong way. So some Conservatives say we need a change around Pierre Poilievre, around his inner circle, and it starts with Jenny Byrne. If she stays, I've been told, caucus will lose patience. It will be more difficult to support Pierre if there's a confidence vote in caucus. And it's either Pierre who shows Jenny's the door, or caucus will be ready to show Pierre the door. She's a polarizing figure in Conservative circles, and right now she is wearing the sting of the defeat.
I find that kind of interesting. Now, I don't know what makes her such a polarizing figure in the Conservative space, but based on the recent election results, the Conservatives have done better than they ever have. They gained more seats. The amount of people voting for them was higher than ever before. They flipped certain Liberal ridings to Conservative. Overall, although they lost, they still gained a significant amount, more than they ever have. Now, obviously, a loss is still a loss, and the Conservatives have lost the past 4 elections now. If Jenny Burns is in control here of the past 4 elections, then yeah, it might be time for her to go. 4 major losses in a row, that's not a good record. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind here that they did hit new records across the board, across the entire country. So it feels like a bit of a double-edged sword. Like, you did hit new numbers, groundbreaking records for the Conservatives, right? Record-breaking rallies, etc., etc. But this is the 4th loss consecutively. So I've got a strong feeling that she probably will get the boot.
But it's clear that not all Conservatives feel that way. What is the sort of the defense for keeping her on?
Well, they say we accomplished a lot. We won a lot of blue-collar riding in labor ridings. We've got a lot of cultural vote in the 905 area around Toronto. The strategy worked. We've got the best seat count since Stephen Harper, the best popular vote since Brian Mulroney. It worked. The difference, the detractors will say, is that Brian Mulroney and Stephen Harper formed government. Pierre Poilievre did not. So critics are not swayed by this argument. And also, they seemed willing, though the critics seemed willing, though, for a while to wait until after the summer. Let Pierre reflect on the defeat, on what changes he needs to bring. Let him get elected in a by-election in Alberta that's coming up. And if there's no change in the fall, pressure would have resumed. But now, with talks of possibly having a convention for the Conservative Party earlier this fall instead of next spring, seems to change a little bit the mind of people. They feel that if there's a confidence vote by all the members in the base at this convention, it might short-circuit a possible confidence vote inside the caucus brought by the Chung Reform Act. And so they feel that it might influence the decision. So now I think it did influence the decisions of critics to come forward as this time. And now they say the ball is in the camp of Pierre Poilievre.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Christian, thanks for this.
Cheers.
All right, let's dig into this story a little bit more. And who better than today's power panel? James Moore is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. Shachi Kurl is the president of Angus Reid Institute. And here with me in studio, Stevie O'Brien is a former chief of staff to Liberal cabinet ministers. Hello to you all. James, if I may start with you. You've worked with Jenny Byrne. What do you make of the criticism, the support, and this story emerging from caucus?
I first met Jenny Byrne back, I believe, in 1996, 1997, Reform Party youth, and I've known her for over 30 years thereabouts. And so, I have great regard for her, the successes she's had in politics, leading national campaigns, leading leadership campaigns, and all that. I don't doubt the report and the reporting that's been done on this. I wish people would be more, transparent and honest as opposed to whispering to reporters. But look, when you have an election campaign that's disappointing in its outcome in terms of its seat count and in terms of the leader losing his own seat, people want accountability, and they want to make sure that the pathway to victory next time is clearer. And some people think that Jenny should go. I get that, but I think there's the last part of what was just said there in Christian's report about taking the summer to reflect and think about this. I mean, I think that's something that Pierre Poilievre has to do. Jenny's someone of enormous capability. She can raise an army and win leaderships and win national campaigns. And I think, the caucus and the party membership both really want accountability of what went wrong. And it's true that a lot went right. Pierre Poilievre got more votes as a percentage of people who voted in this campaign than any one of the 5 election campaigns that Stephen Harper ran in, and he won 3 of the 5. Now, unfairness is the nature of our system sometimes in terms of the seat count at the end of the day, and people have to be held accountable for that. And, Jenny should have an opportunity to explain, what happened in the campaign. And if she wants to stay on, make that case as well. But caucus members are certainly entitled to ask for accountability and transparency about what happened and what went wrong.
I feel like I need to point out here, it's not Jenny's fault that nearly 100 candidates were on Pierre's ballot. That probably wasn't her fault. But the overall switch from attacking Mark Carney and the Liberals to then going after Donald Trump, what felt like a late game, campaign running point. It was clear that he should have just focused on calling out Carney and the Liberals, exposing them for who they really are. As we've seen now, Carney literally has lied about everything. Every single thing he ran on, he lied about. Everything he told Canadians, elbows up, well, more like elbows up, knees down, stuck in the gravy. And I guess that could be blamed on Jenny based on her running the campaign. Once again, I don't exactly know, but she has been campaign manager since 2011. The track record not looking too good here.
And I mean, Andrew, to that extent, crass political calculations can be pretty brutal in those rooms. And I guess it comes down to, can a leader who, he lost his own seat, does he have the political capital to defend his closest advisor when these kinds of charges come up in caucus?
I mean, caucus dynamics are fascinating, and they obviously vary a little bit from party to party in terms of the history and the personalities that are there. But I think one of the things that's happening here is that there are a lot of members of that caucus who are looking to see whether this becomes emblematic of Poilievre understanding he needs to change. This is not just blaming it on Jenny Byrne. If she leaves, everything's fine. Obviously, part of this is to try to put things back together with the Ford, the Doug Ford side of the party. I think it'll be interesting to hear what was made of Jamel Giovanni being left out of the caucus assignments. But there are a lot of pieces that I think people are looking at to go, did Poilievre actually get it? Did he actually understand that this, compressing of opinion into a very, very narrow straitjacket of views and messaging didn't end up resonating? And is he prepared and is he capable of changing that? That's what we'll have to see over the next few weeks.
I've heard this a few times now. Poilievre needs to change. He needs to change his tune. He needs to no longer be the same guy he was during the campaign. But I feel like I need to point out the only reason he got so many votes in the first place is because of the way he is. You need to be authentic, especially when speaking to the entire country, and to just switch up. Like what kind of switch up are we talking about here? If Poilievre shows up in the House of Commons and all of a sudden just starts acting differently. He doesn't call out the Liberals for their terrible policies. He doesn't call out the Liberals for bringing back half of the same cabinet and a majority of the caucus. What, is he just supposed to stand there and say nothing? I don't understand this whole idea of he needs to switch up. He needs to be different. That's not what got him there in the first place. And if they mean more in terms of working with the current federal government to combat the tariffs and Donald Trump, then yeah, he's probably going to have to work with the Liberals to some degree, but he's also going to sit there and dissect whatever bill they try to pass. Time and time again, the Liberals say one thing with their bills, oh, we're going to cut taxes, for example, but then hide a million other things in the bill which don't benefit anybody in the long run but themselves, which is why we have an official opposition. Speaking of Jamil Jivani, I thought it was a terrible decision to not include him in the shadow cabinet. I think Jamil Jivani is a very strong conservative figure, a very strong voice, and if he isn't at least pushed up to the front bench or a more pronounced position, then I think that is just an overall terrible decision to make. Jivani here coming out talking about the broken immigration system that the Trudeau Liberals implemented, then started to run back near the end of his reign as Prime Minister.
I've been thinking about how I want to approach the job as an MP this time around. And a lot of it, I think, is about, now that I understand a bit better how Ottawa works, trying to pierce what I would describe as the Ottawa bubble more often and more frequently. Over the course of the campaign, when you're knocking on doors and you're talking to people, you have, I think, a clear sense of how people feel about a lot of different issues. But oddly, when you come to this place, you sometimes encounter a culture here where it's not very clear whether people understand what the common sense priorities are of the average hardworking family. Liberals have been in power here for going on over a decade now, and I think their worldview, their priorities, their approach to important policy issues has shaped the way Ottawa works. And I'll give you a very specific example of that. The issue of immigration, right? So every day I'm knocking on doors and I'm talking to people of all different backgrounds and walks of life about immigration. And there's a pretty clear consensus, even across people with different political views, that immigration levels are just unsustainably high. Anyone who goes to a hospital can see there's not enough beds. Anyone who goes to look for a family doctor can't find one. You go to buy a house, there's not enough of those. You go to find a job, there might not be one of those for you either. And it seems very common sense when you're knocking on doors and you're canvassing and you're talking to people on the street that this is an issue that needs to be tackled. But we are now entering year 10 or 11 of a culture in Ottawa where you cannot even really have a sensible conversation about it. And it really shouldn't be hard. I'll give you an example. I'm canvassing in North Oshawa last year for the by-election where I first got elected. And I meet a gentleman who cannot speak English. Tried to talk to him, but communication barrier just made it hard, and very nice guy though. I see him again a year later in this most recent election, and he knows a little bit more English this time. And you know what he says to me? Too much immigration. And I said, sir, your English is impeccable. Now, he didn't know a lot of words, but he knew enough to get that point across because he knew what he was experiencing and feeling on the ground. He didn't have to be in Canada very long to see that. And that's what I'm trying to get across when I say what it looks like to bring common sense to Parliament. The first thing I'm going to do as the Member of Parliament for Bowmanville, Oshawa North, is launch a petition to end the temporary foreign workers program. This program has been a disaster for workers in this country. From January to October of 2024 alone, over 160,000 work permits were issued for this program. And a fraction of those for seasonal agricultural work might make sense, but the vast majority are putting a crunch on the workforce in this country. Youth unemployment hit 14%, the highest it's been in a decade, not counting COVID years. And a lot of young people are struggling to find their first job, their first opportunity in the job market. The wages for Canadian workers have gone down dramatically because of programs like the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And I understand that the Liberals will say they've taken action on the immigration issue. Prime Minister Mark Carney just put out a mandate letter that said he wanted to reform immigration. But I think we need to hold them to a higher standard than just empty words. The Globe and Mail just published an article where economists are pointing out there are hundreds of thousands of people in Canada who have overstayed their visas, and the government has lost track of them. When we say the immigration system has some very serious flaws, we mean it. And I can think of no better way to anchor how we move forward than thinking about this from what is in the best interests of Canadian workers and Canadian families. So I think things need to be shaken up around here. I think the Ottawa bubble needs to be pierced. I think common sense needs to be said. That is what I pledge to do as the Member of Parliament for Bowmanville, Oshawa North, as a member of the Conservative Party team. I'm excited by the opportunity to be a voice for people who are often not heard in this country, and I will work very, very hard to do my best in making sure they are heard.
As I've said many times, very excited to see Jamil Javani return back to the House of Commons. A very, very strong voice for the Conservatives. Well, if the recent federal election wasn't bad enough for the NDP, it seems like things are just simply getting worse for them. So it's not going to shock me if once again the NDP buddy up with the Liberals.
Let's talk to you a little bit about your leadership, because you're named the interim leader, but that has been questioned by three, basically half your caucus. If you sort of take you out of the caucus, half of them. So Jenny Kwan, Leah Gazan, and Laura Idlut. The Globe and Mail obtained a letter that they sent to the party saying that there was no consultation. They subsequently said they support you. Have you reached out to these three to try and mend fences here with the process? And do they really have do you have their backing fully, do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, we had a tough election, Mike, there's no question about that. And it was very dislocating for all of us. And so I think what's happened is that we've had to deal with some issues that normally you don't have to deal with, but all parties do at different time. We were without our leader who didn't win a seat. What I can tell you is we've had very positive meetings together. We had a caucus meeting yesterday, and I can tell you there's a very strong commitment in our caucus among all 7 caucus members to work together in a united way and bring the voices of those 1.2 million Canadians who voted for us, that we feel a very strong obligation to, all of us in our caucus. And that's to fight for things that we heard during the election. People need an affordable house. People need a good family-sustaining job. The price of groceries and utilities and everything else is too high for too many people. Businesses are worried about tariffs. So what unites us as a caucus is a very fervent desire to bring those voices to Parliament and to advocate for the policies that we know people need. And I'm confident that that's going to drive us forward in a very strong, coherent way.
Are you confident that your caucus will stick together? Weeks ago, you had said the Liberals are putting out feelers to your MPs, asking them whether or not they'd want to cross the floor. Can you guarantee that the 7 inside the NDP are going to stay as members of the NDP?
I'm 100% confident in our caucus, every member.
And that none of them will want to be tempted or even look to go elsewhere?
Look, Mike, we have 7 strong New Democrats. These are powerful, passionate, experienced parliamentarians that care deeply about their communities and the NDP. And so I'm just 100% confident in the commitment and in the skill set of our colleagues. I've said before, we don't have 1 leader in the NDP. We have 7 leaders in the NDP. And I think that we're going to be a very powerful caucus moving forward. And we're going to stick together, and we're going to, I think, surprise a lot of people.
Taking a step back here, the electorate did send a pretty strong message to the NDP that it was not the first, second, or even third choice for a number of people. What do you think are the changes that need to happen with the NDP going forward to recapture some of that vote and to really appeal to more people? I mean, some people look at this as, a fork in the road for you to figure out what the NDP needs to do next.
Well, first, I'm not sure about the premise that people have left the NDP. I think a lot of people, a lot of New Democrats, were very concerned about Donald Trump.
You don't think a lot of people left the NDP? You guys had 24 total seats and now have 7, lost official party status. People not only have lost faith in the NDP, they don't even want to acknowledge you as a party. Jagmeet Singh single-handedly decimated the NDP by sticking up for Trudeau every step of the way. By joining a coalition with the Liberals, keeping Trudeau in power, not voting him out when those confidence votes came, and they want to sit here and blame Donald Trump. This is why the NDP will most likely lose every seat they have because they're out of touch, they don't have any accountability for themselves, and they can't even see why they lost so many seats. It wasn't Donald Trump. It was the fact that you had an abysmal leader that single-handedly allowed a terrible government to stay in power. And people are fed up with this party that has done literally nothing for Canadians. The NDP have zero value in Parliament as we currently speak, and they can't even realize it. I want to know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, hit that sub button if you're new, and thank you for watching.